I'm Shawn Vestal. I'm a columnist with the Spokesman Review and an author. I've worked at the Spokesman Review for 20 years now, and I first came here as an editor, and part of that job was overseeing, at that time, a team of reporters that covered a variety of social services. About a decade ago, I became a columnist, and in that role I've written about homelessness a lot and covered it a lot as an issue. I've written opinions about it and done reporting about it as well. And so the issue has been on my radar screen the whole time I've been in Spokane, and it has seemed to have grown in seriousness over that time. And sort of we've hit these moments periodically over those years, as I'm sure you know, where we see either a surge in folks on the streets or some other thing happens that gets people's attention, and then it becomes a political issue, and we go through this cycle where we argue over the same things over and over again and don't do much in response. I feel like if you were to ask me what our homeless response is, I would say I don't think we have a homeless response, and that's the problem. I don't think we have a unified system, that the kind of thing that you might develop to really go after a problem you were seriously concerned about addressing. We stay stuck in a debate over whether to do anything or whether services actually cause homelessness. You know, a lot of sort of bad ideas still drive our politics and keep us in lockstep. So I think there are individual things that have been really successful and done well. I think the permanent housing has put people into housing. The Catholic Charities Havens projects is permanent housing. I think those have been good for what they do. They're obviously not taking care of the whole problem. You know, I think Catholic Charities has done other good things, as have many other organizations that have done individual efforts, run shelters. But I think that we don't have a single system, and there's such a resistance to doing more, to doing enough, to sort of match the scale of the problem, that we're really just trapped. And for the current administration and the previous administration politically, it almost seems as if there's been a decision not to move forward because the ideological views of how we might move forward are so limiting. Like, I guess what I mean is I feel like a lot of people, that the mayor and a lot of people who support the mayor basically don't want to do anything about the problem. They don't believe the problem is one that is made up of what I think people who work more closely with the homeless would say, you know, that these are problems that are sort of deep, complex problems that grow out of a variety of issues in every one of these folks' lives that is really hard to sort of sort out and simplify. And we want to approach that with a very simplistic kind of who deserves and does not deserve the help. And I kind of understand that response, to be honest with you. I think it's a response from someone who's very distant from the reality of it. And it's kind of easy, and but it keeps us frozen in a place in which all these human beings continue to live in desperate circumstances, continue to suffer, and we just don't take steps forward. You know, the irony is we're going through a political campaign right now where what I think of as the anti-homeless candidates are saying what they said last time and what they said the previous time and what they said the time before that, which is we can't keep doing the same thing. Well, we're not really doing the thing. We're stuck where we've been for years and years now while that street population has grown. Well, I wish I had a clearer answer to why we hadn't, but I think that unfortunately, a huge part of it is that people don't think we should do something, that if we do something that we are enabling the problem. This is a very common thing that I hear from people who tend to just respond to homelessness as an issue of blight and quality of life, as an issue that affects them, not that affects the people on the street. And I think that there's a very powerful pull to believe that people should get what they deserve. And frankly, if you and I were talking in an idealistic sense, I think that. I think basically, I believe in the idea that people should work for what they get. I believe in the idea that, that in a fair world, the consequence and the cause should have a direct relationship, and that maybe if someone is putting a burden on the society in some way, I'm not saying that's necessarily true of all these people, but it is true of some. I mean, they are putting kind of a burden, but I just mean that to expect a very simple kind of direct cause and effect, like we might apply to ourselves, those of us who live in houses and have comfortable lives and are economically secure. I get why that idea triumphs, because it feels right based on our own life, right? Like I tell my son, you're not going to get these things if you don't, do what we ask you to do, or you're going to lose things if you behave in ways I don't want you to behave. And the homeless challenge for us, I think, challenges that belief. I think we have to extend ourselves, our sympathy and our empathy and our understanding, and maybe just our practicality as well. Even if we don't have a sympathetic response to the human beings on the street, we have a practical obligation to try to address the way that a lack of services affects them and affects everybody else too. Now, I put that second thing way down the priority list. Some people put it way at the top of the priority list, but I still think it's on the list. And I do think if the viaducts become little mini tent cities, that's not good for anybody. It's not good for those people, and it isn't also good for those of us who walk around downtown and live downtown. I'm not scared of those people like many people seem to be. I will walk past them, and I'll walk past them with my kids. You hear these downtown business owners talk about how terrifying it is to walk past a homeless person with their kid, but nevertheless, I don't like that part of the problem either. I think we're stuck in very simplistic thinking in which, look at that person, he's doing drugs. Like, why should we support him for doing drugs? And my view is we have to think beyond that, and that it will also take a brave political leader who really believes in this, who is willing to take a ton of heat from the community and possibly cost themselves political office, spend money. It would be unpopular, or at least it would be unpopular with a significant, powerful group of people in town who have a lot of influence and a lot of voice, to really build an effective homeless system here all at once, to really take a handful of steps to connect the system, a system that communicates with itself, a system that has a kind of front end, where maybe we have people who know everybody on the streets, like who are out there working to try to find solutions for people, have a successful variety of solutions, right? Instead of, we have this one kind of shelter for you, and if you don't want that, well, then you can't be here. That's not, like, I don't understand how people think that plays out. Or a good number of people think we can just arrest people. I mean, I hear all the time, and I have for years, from particular property owners downtown, that will say to me, if you peed in the alley in Coeur d'Alene, you'd be in jail right now. I got one guy in particular who's told me that a few times over the years. And I always say, no, you wouldn't, in my opinion. But how long do you think you would go to jail in Coeur d'Alene for the crime of misdemeanor public urination? And how would that go towards solving our problem, where we have perhaps 5,000 single adult, mostly men, on the streets? There are more, or no, I'm sorry, that's probably about 3,500 single adult. Anyway, the estimate is more than 5,000 total homeless, as I understand it, and more than 3,500 single men on the street. And that's the population we see a lot. And that's the population that's grown a lot. And that's the population that is the most difficult to address with simple solutions. Sometimes it's the population that's, some of those folks are a little resistant to help. They're men with a variety of problems that maybe don't like to be talked down to, or whatever it is. There's all sorts of things going on there, and we offer these very narrow options to them, which are, number one, insufficient to the numbers, and number two, not gonna work for a lot of people who have, whether they're suffering from mental illness, addiction, the combination of the two, which I think is very common. And our answer is get off this street, go all the way across town to a place that is gonna drug test you, or just go somewhere else. And then we find ourselves surprised that we haven't made progress. So I really, to stop wandering around, I think the most important thing to us actually having a community-wide system would be political leadership, courageous political leadership from someone probably in the mayor's office, the way our system is set up right now. We have recently had mayors who don't really want to do more. They don't want to spend the money. They might have, supporters who just don't believe in the idea. And so I think it would take someone to really get out there and be a champion and put themselves on the line and possibly cost themselves their political office to do it. That's a hard thing to find, I think. I think to do it right, we do need to spend more. I'm always happy to see when we get grant funding, money from the feds, because that eliminates the political obstacle for people at City Hall. If you're spending money that comes from the feds and you're David Condon or Nadine Woodward, it's a much more easy thing to get done than if you're asking them to support spending city money. So I'm always grateful to see that. There are always issues with those things, sunsetting, right? But right now, we have been in a position of great opportunity. We've not really so far capitalized on that opportunity, but where with the pandemic, there's been a lot of money that's come into governments, local governments. We've used that money for all kind of things. The county has used some of it for PR, for tourism. We could devote a lot of that money to making, especially some of those first steps in establishing a system that are expensive and that maybe are not recurring. So if you open a shelter, you got to pay for running it every year, but there's some cost and effort to getting it up and getting it going. And I think these sources of funds can help us get over that first hurdle. But in the long run, we still have to spend money on those services if we're gonna. And this is where I think some leadership could help, because we would also save money. And for whatever humanitarian reasons, in my opinion, we should help people. There are also practical reasons. Street homelessness is costly to the city. It's costly to the citizens. The fire department and the police department, a lot of their time is taken up, I wouldn't say dealing with that problem, but interacting with that population in a way that is just dealing with the emergency of somebody about to die on the street, or of crime sometimes, which happens in that population. Of course it does. I think less than many people suggest, but it does happen. And those people are victims as well as perpetrators sometimes. All that's costly. Police and fire time in this city is a huge amount of money for us. And everything that goes over here is not going over there. So every time the police, there's 3 of them downtown dealing with an issue that is maybe not a violent crime, but has become a health and safety issue, I think is a euphemism that's often used for it, just a gathering of homeless people often. Those people aren't responding to burglaries or whatever else is going on in town. And so I don't know, I wish we had a good estimate of those other costs, but we definitely have them. Downtown property owners will tell you they'll tell you a lot about how much they have to spend on security because of homeless people. Now, I work downtown. My wife works downtown. I'm aware that there are real problems around that issue, but I also, I think a lot of it is just a desire not to see it. That security question is, it's not nothing, and I don't want to minimize it. Things happen, windows get broken, there's graffiti and trash. There's a lot of trash downtown right now. And yet, to turn it into a police response and a fire department response is a very expensive way to deal with that problem. And I think if we had a place for people to go, if we had a place for people to go to the bathroom, if we had a place for them to be during the day, all of those would help to address what seems to bother most people, which is their simple presence. You know, a lot of downtown property owners seem to see the proper role of the police as to do what they ask them to do. I've engaged with some of them who have reached out to me to say, I mentioned earlier, if I peed on the wall in Coeur d'Alene, I'd be in jail. Or let me tell you what I saw on my doorstep today. There was a drug addict out there openly using heroin, and he had junk around him. And when one of my employees asked him to move, he was rude to her. And so that's frustrating. I get that that's frustrating, but the person who thinks the police are gonna fix that, now maybe the police could move that guy. He's on private property, he might be trespassing, unless he's sitting on the sidewalk, maybe he's on the, you know, there are things that the police could do, but there's very little really that the police could do to achieve what he wants to achieve, which is to make that person not be there. The sidewalks are public spaces. Homeless people are citizens, whether we like that or not. We do have a law about sitting and lying, but that has certain conditions that are court imposed. Those are based on the law. Drug use is no longer a crime that we don't charge people for simple possession in this state anymore. That's a recent thing, and the justice system is working on that, but the Supreme Court decision last year, or earlier this year, simple drug possession is not a charge. Even if we could take people to jail for that, we have an overcrowded jail right now that we're going into debt dealing with all these misdemeanor crimes that are mostly people going in and out, in and out, in and out. And even if we were putting people in jail for graffiti, for trespassing, for drug possession, they wouldn't be in there forever. And they come out with their ability to get out of homelessness, if they're interested in that, damaged, worse than before. Now they've got to go to court, to get back and forth to court. Now they're going to have financial obligations that they probably can't pay. Their ability to get a job is hampered. All of that. The idea that the police are a solution is a fantasy, but it is a deeply held one. And people really think that the city council is refusing to let the police arrest homeless people, or the city council has tied the police's hands. It is a very common thing that you hear, and I know that some people hear it from police officers, that they would like to do X and Y, but the city won't let them, or the city council won't let them. It's a very common narrative in town. And so I do think we have a history of the wealthy using the police to essentially act as their security at their gates. Definitely that's an explicit, overt use of the police as you go further back in history. And this is a kind of version of it that people who oppose offering homeless services seem aghast that the police won't come and take care of the heroin user on their front porch. They just cannot believe it, that the police can't come and just make this problem vanish. And it's been around for so long, I think they've had the opportunity to understand it isn't that easy. And while I get the desire to have the police solve a problem for you, like I get my car broken into in my neighborhood a lot. We have that kind of crime in this town a lot. It's with this low-level property crime that tends to go along with issues of poverty. It's been true for years and years, and and the cops never come. They never ever come when somebody breaks into my car, and I would be foolish to expect them to. At first, I kind of wanted them to, but now I kind of realize, look, they can't go to every, and so there's a certain amount of privilege wrapped up in the idea that I'm going to blame the cops for not showing up to take care of my problems for me, and thinking that it's a failure of the political system if you have to secure your own property, which is just an unfortunate reality of the world, that you have to make some of those decisions yourself, as though the police force weren't right next door to you. But mostly my concern with the police, with looking to the police to deal with homelessness, is that it won't work. It will continue the suffering of people. It will continue to throw our resources down a hole. It will not do anything to help people get off the streets. It will just move them to another street if at the end of the day we don't have any place for them to go. And that's the baseline. We don't have any place for them to go. And some are hard to help, but not all of them. Not all of those several thousand people want to sleep under the viaduct, and we're not giving them anywhere to go. We've reduced the number of low barrier beds. The argument that we keep doing the same old thing, we're doing less of the same old thing, and we never added anything to the same old thing. What we're doing is what we've been doing for, I guess there's some small changes. I'd be overstating it to say we haven't done anything different in the last decade, but we've done very little, and they've been small things. They're not proportionate to the size of the problem. Well, I think that lending your voice to the political arena is one way. We are where we are because of what the people in office perceive to be what the public wants. And they're not incorrect that a significant part of the population is kind of the mindset that offer them that meal over on the corner or tell them to get out. Like, they think that we've done enough and that the thing to do is get tough. That's a very politically popular idea because it doesn't take very much thought. It doesn't take any understanding. And but if you just put that on the ballot, should we get tough or should we spend a lot of money to help people? I bet you get tough wins. So I think the people who have a deeper, better understanding, now I should say, I believe those people have been good at participating in the public process and letting their views be known. I'm not in any way chiding them or saying, but I do think that one thing to do is to support however you see your role as supporting those who want to achieve real solutions, and to join in whatever ways you see as appropriate in your own life with those who are trying to sort of work on the other side. That might be helping out at places. I do think in my own life, I sometimes feel like volunteering helps me feel satisfied and finished in a way that maybe isn't in the long run the best. You know what I mean? Like, okay, I did that. I spooned up some food. And I still think that's important and good, don't get me wrong, but I think citizens would need to make it clear that that's what they want, and that enough of them who feel that way are letting people know, just as the guys who own businesses downtown are getting in their car and driving around every single morning and reporting, hey, I saw a homeless person over here, city. I saw somebody else over here. Some of our wealthiest citizens every morning are getting up and pounding City Hall with just granular level information about where they saw a homeless person, and then sitting back and getting bitter because the police don't rush right out and fix it, I guess. And I don't know if there's a similar kind of pressure out there on the other side. There might be, there are, from some there are, but I think that's important. I think people, when there are proposals out there, can kind of raise their voice at City Hall. There are opportunities to speak up. Obviously, people who are very, very committed could try to work on solutions themselves through churches, private organizations. Many of the best things that happen in the town, and there are many good things that happen in the town, right? That's what they are, right? They're I'm such an old man. It's not cup of cool water. Anyway, the meal at the church down here, and then there's another meal at the, there's the women of kids free lunch. There's all these individual programs. There are shelters, there are meals, there's food services. I don't know that we have enough, and we don't have enough sort of beds, obviously, but there are things that groups have done to add one piece to the mosaic, and that's something that people can do. I don't place a lot of my faith in a solution in a public uprising. I do believe, I don't know that I would say Churchill is the right, but I do believe that there has to be some leadership. Somebody has to take that and run with it in a difficult situation. You can get into the office of where the decisions are made with the support of, let's say there is a majority of people who say we need to spend $5 million, whatever it is, I don't know what it is, to create a system, to add more low barrier beds, to have kind of a triage point at the front end where we're forming relationships with people and helping them move out of that low barrier shelter, but keeping that low barrier shelter there for them, keeping them off the street to the degree that we can, and helping them move in the direction they need to go, and having a variety of directions, and having enough treatment for the problems that plague them, which we do not have close to enough treatment. People talk about, we need to order them into drug addiction. Another fantasy. There is not a bunch of drug addiction treatment out there for homeless people right now that they could pay for, that's even available in any form whatsoever. So there is the matter of public support, but somebody has to push over these not insignificant obstacles. No neighbor wants this stuff in their, is the unfortunate truth. Getting it located is very, very difficult. That takes a politician who's willing to take those hits and be unpopular. And what we saw with David Condon, former Mayor David Condon, was he's like, yeah, let's do a shelter and let's put it out kind of toward the valley so it's a little bit of a shared thing. And they had one meeting where they just got beat up by the people there, and that was it. No homeless proposal. Maybe I'm overstating this. That was basically it for homeless ideas that came out of that administration. That was the end of that road. Now, and I sometimes heard the mayor at that time cite a column that I had written, and I had used the words that I said, the best place to put a homeless shelter is no place. Now, that wasn't an argument that we shouldn't put a homeless shelter. It was an argument that we have to push over this idea that there's a good place, because there really isn't a place where the people around it will start off happy about it. So anyway, I do think to do a large unified system would be the ideal way to approach a large complex problem. A system where the parts were in communication with each other, where UGM wasn't, where one shelter isn't the only shelter or the only kind of shelter that we offer, but is one option among several options that does good work for the people that are ready for that work, or whose mind is in the place to take that work, or who want to, but that's not it, that we have to have more. If I had a magic wand, I think what I would hope for is a kind of a front-end low barrier shelter, or maybe a couple of them, that had services at the top of the list of the priorities for what they were going to provide there, but which took all takers, which accepted all takers, and at a level that was, sufficient to the need. I'm not saying that I would support a 3,000 bed shelter right in the middle of downtown. I don't, but I'd like to get closer to that figure and maybe a couple of shelters. And I do think one of our problems is people don't want to put it downtown. I do think it has to be central to be effective. We'll see. The mayor's going to try to put one somewhere out of the center of downtown. I imagine that's going to be difficult, to say the least. But a place where, first off, people can go and be during any time of the day, a place where you can go even if you're drunk or high or having problems. We're not saying you have to deserve to be here. We're saying you can be here, even if all it is an alternative to the streets. If all we do is give people a place to be, that will be better for them, and it will be better for everybody else too. And then we begin to have, I would love to see us have teams where we form relationships with those people, meaning that there are caseworkers there that get to know them one-on-one. I'm told, I haven't done enough research on this, but I'm told San Diego had a program like that. And I think what you see is anytime any city seems to have succeeded with homelessness, there's this period where everybody says, hey, look what they did, and then it gets hard again, because nothing works that well for that long. But they had teams of people, almost like police teams, who are out there building relationships on the street, trying to direct people here and there. They spend a lot of money and time and resources. So instead of the fire department responding, instead of the cops responding, they would be down there trying to respond, trying to say, we have this shelter over here. Would you like to go to this shelter over here and get sober? Would you like to try this? Would you like to go over there? We have a family shelter here. If you're in, to try and just expand the amount of outreach and connection we're doing and expand the number of beds. And then use that, not as the end of the system, but as the beginning of the system. A system that communicates with itself, where all the parts are, I don't quite understand why this has been so hard, but it seems like this has been hard for us to have a coordinated system, a system where the city knows where all the beds are. To me, that would seem like a simple thing to do, and I don't understand why it's hard. If they want to enforce sit and lie, they need to know where the beds are. I would think that the people who want to enforce sit and lie would have worked to get that information quickly, publicly available, and yet years down the road, they talk about how they don't have it, it's impossible, we're working on it, we're going to do it next year. All the same stuff that's been said for quite a number of years now. The idea that you just take one step off the streets and you're back in life there's just a lot to changing. You've let go of a lot. I think if someone has sort of crossed over from not homeless to living in homelessness, they've crossed over to a different kind of existence in a way, and I think what you say is just so true about their sort of just the human experience they're going through, and then that's kind of coupled with these larger economic forces and factors that, this is happening all over. It's not just here that it's getting deeper. And what I think is that at the bottom of our economy, so to speak, the lower rungs of our economy, there are many people who live these very precarious lives, very precarious. The latest state thing on the homeless numbers showed, I wish I could remember what the exact number was, but it had the number of near homeless. I don't know how they came up with that number, but it was several thousand more, meaning some kind of shock puts them right on the street. Puts those people right on the street. And we've had those kinds of shocks in the last 20 years where I bet every single one of them has pushed a few people off a cliff they can't climb back up again. And this is a lot of people. Our homeless population it's a lot of people in one sense. In another sense, it's not a lot of people. In a population-wide sense, it's a small proportion of our population. And they are people who, I think, just a tsunami of different factors have hit in their lives. And then on top of that, we have an economic system that has in various ways added more burden to that. So our safety net programs over the last decades have become stricter, have required more kind of work requirements or things that push some people out. Maybe it's not everybody, and maybe it works well for some other people, and maybe there's a reason to have those things. And yet you lose people when you start raising the bar to getting basic help. Can people get help with food? Do they have to jump through a bunch of hoops to get that help? Pushes a few people out. Can people pay their heating bills? If there's too many people lined up for that help at the local agency, more need than there is support, pushes a few. All these things add up, and we've had these kind of major economic shocks. We had the financial crisis, which I think probably had downstream effects like that. We've had what's happened in the last few years, which is having downstream effects. And so I think that's I think there are parts of this that aren't really a Spokane specific problem. In fact, I don't think most of it is, other than the human beings live here in our community. I don't know what you do about that, to be honest with you, because those are slow-moving disasters, right? They took a lot of different parts that added up to that problem. And the person to sort of cross back over that border, you say, okay, here's an apartment, you should be good. That's just another fantasy, like they need to get around to places. They need to get work. They need to begin or at least get a place where they're in a system that they haven't been in before, where they got to qualify for things, and that is a nightmare. It's a bureaucratic nightmare to do anything to get help in this world that we live in. My wife lost her job during COVID for a while and had to get some unemployment benefits. Didn't probably have to. We were, many people had it worse than we did, but it was insane how hard it was for her to work with the unemployment system. And I just thought, how does a person who doesn't have a house and a cell phone and a husband who's got a good job, how does that person even begin to start to negotiate this system, to climb back out of wherever their dire straits are,